Hello, I'm Kyle Washington, and I'm a safety associate for Andrews Construction. On behalf of Andrews, welcome to the project and welcome to the team. Before you get started on the project, there's just a few things that you need to know. Let's get started.
If any of the requirements in your employer's safety policy are different than in the Andrews policy, then you must comply with whichever requirements are stricter.
Let's start with your clothing. Shirts with at least 4-inch sleeves will be required, as well as pants and work boots. Cut-off shirts, shorts, and tennis shoes do not provide adequate protection and will not be allowed on the job site.
All employees working on the project shall wear a hard hat. Hard hats will protect you from overhead hazards, and all hard hats are to be in compliance with ANSI Z89.1, which can be seen on the inside of the hard hat. Your eyes can be very vulnerable to injury on a construction site. Therefore, anytime a task could be potentially dangerous to the eyes, or when you have a tool in hand, you must have your eye protection on. If there is any grinding, chipping, sawing, cutting, or overhead percussion work being performed, you must have your face shield or goggles on. Remember that when wearing a face shield, you must keep your safety glasses on. The face shield is simply meant for extra protection, and it defeats the purpose if the safety glasses are removed. Keep in mind that eye injuries can be very serious and very painful, so let's keep them protected. The 6-foot rule. At no time will any employee be allowed to be exposed to a free fall to a lower level greater than 6 feet without utilizing some means of fall protection. So any employee working at or above 6 feet must be protected by the use of a guardrail system, a personal fall arrest system, or any other system that's in compliance with OSHA's 1926 subpart M. Guardrails must have a top rail, a mid rail, and be capable of supporting 200 pounds of force. Here are some examples of guardrails that would not be acceptable. If for any reason you need to remove a guardrail to perform your task, you must first coordinate with Andrews management. Do not remove guardrails without permission. Any floor holes or openings must be either covered in accordance with OSHA standards with a cover secured in place and marked with the word hole, or by the use of a guardrail or barricade system. When personal fall arrest systems are used, proper anchor points must be used and be capable of supporting 5,000 pounds per worker attached. Here are some examples of some anchor points that would not be acceptable.
Inspect your harness, grab it by the dorsal D-ring, and run your hand down the straps throughout the entire harness, checking for any damage in the fabric or the stitching. Check the stitching throughout the entire harness to ensure it has not been under any impact. Also check all metal connections and hooks. In the leg straps, you can check all the grommets. If there's been any damage to your harness that affects the integrity of it, it must be removed from service. If you have any further questions about your harness, check the manufacturer's label. Now on some harnesses, they'll be equipped with an impact indicator. You can check it to see if it's been under any impact or not. If it has been set off, it must be removed from service. To ensure that you're wearing your harness properly, you want to make sure that you have it adjusted so that it's nice and snug and not too loose. You want your chest strap to be about mid-chest and your leg straps to be evenly tightened. Your D-ring should be in your upper back and in between your shoulder blades to ensure that your fall is arrested properly.
To quickly inspect the ladder, you want to check the rungs on both sides of the ladder, ensure that nothing is damaged or missing. You also want to check down the side of the ladder, ensure there's no cracks in the ladder itself. Quickly inspect and ensure all your rivets are in good shape. Always check your locking devices, and before using the ladder, ensure that it is fully extended and on a flat and level surface. If all that is good, you're good to start work.
Some other rules that apply to extension ladders is that the ladder must be secure, the top rail must exceed 3 feet above the landing point, and it must be at a 4-to-1 pitch. For every 4 feet the ladder goes up, 1 foot that it comes down horizontally. A quick way to tell about this on a construction site, stand in front of it and stick your arms out.
When performing this quick field test, if the tips of your fingers just touch the rung that's at your shoulder level, then your ladder is close to a 4-to-1 ratio. Employees are required to inspect grounds on all tools and cords daily. Extension cords should be in good condition and free of any physical damage. All cords shall be rated for construction use and no smaller than a 14 gauge cord. It's recommended to use 10 gauge, 12 gauge, or 14 gauge. Any 16 gauge cords found on the project will be removed. Be sure not to create any tripping hazards when routing your extension cord, and ensure that it is protected from moisture and kept out of standing water. Inspect your cords to ensure that they are the right size, the ground prongs are in place, and they are free from any damage in the installation. Damages on tools and cords shall be removed from service or repaired by a qualified person. All electrical powered tools must be grounded or marked by the manufacturer as double insulated. When using electrical equipment on the project, we must ensure that it is protected by a ground fault circuit interrupter or a GFCI at all times.
So, what exactly is an excavation or a trench? Well,
An excavation is any man-made cut, cavity, trench, or depression in an earth's surface formed by earth removal. A trench is a narrow excavation no more than 15 feet wide, which is measured at the bottom.
generally, trenches are deeper than they are wide or greater than depth than they are width. Being caught in a trench or excavation cave-in is one of the leading causes of fatal injuries in the construction industry. Most cave-ins occur in trenches anywhere from 5 to 15 feet deep, which is very common depth we see out in the construction field.
1 cubic yard of soil can weigh nearly 3,000 pounds, which is why we must protect against cave-ins. Any trench that has a depth of 4 feet or more must have a safe means of egress within 25 feet from any employee inside the trench.
Now, any trench that is more than 5 feet deep must be protected against cave-ins.
Trenches can be protected from cave-ins by the use of shoring, shielding, sloping, or benching. All of these protective systems have to meet specific criteria in OSHA CFR 1926 subpart P, which is why a competent person must be present to determine if the soil is type A, type B, or type C, and to ensure the correct specifications and OSHA standards are followed. What we see most as type B soil with sloping or benching. In this case, the slope must be at a 1-to-1 ratio or 45 degrees. For example, if you have a trench that is 8 foot deep, then it must be benched or sloped 8 foot back. When performing hot work, you must ensure that you have the right PPE for the task and that a fire extinguisher is immediately available and rated for the material in which the work is being performed. Hot work performed in wood structures will have a minimum of 1 compressed water type extinguisher or 5-gallon bucket filled with clean water immediately available from the work being performed. The subcontractor performing the hot work is responsible for designating a fire watch and is responsible for removing or protecting any flammables and/or combustibles from any and all levels affected by hot work. Any and all slag, sparks, or other ignition sources will be contained by the use of shielding or fire retardant blankets. A fire watch must remain in the area for 1 hour after the work is complete or 2 hours in a wood framing area. Therefore, hot work must cease 1 hour before the end of shift for commercial or 2 hours for wood framing. When handling flammable liquids on site, plastic gas jugs are not permitted. Only approved safety cans must be used. Employees shall be required to keep clear of loads. Listen for either a horn or a whistle that will indicate that a load is being lifted and moved. If you hear a horn or a whistle that sounds similar to this, get your head up and be sure to stay out from under the load. tag lines shall be used to guide and control loads that are being lifted and moved. Only established hand signals shall be used to direct the crane operator during lifting operations. Only designated persons are permitted to give hand signals to crane operators except during an emergency. In this instance, any person may give a stop signal. And no employees shall be permitted to ride or be on suspended loads being lifted or moved by cranes. Andrews requires that each subcontractor have an on-site copy of their GHS program with a site-specific chemical inventory and safety data sheets, or SDSs. And all chemicals should be properly labeled and stored per that GHS program. SDSs are to be used as a reference for working with chemicals. Sections 1 through 8 of the SDSs contain general information about the chemical, such as identification, hazards, composition, first aid and emergency control measures, safe handling practices, and personal protective equipment. Sections 9 through 11 and Section 16 contain other technical and scientific information, such as physical and chemical properties, stability and reactivity information, toxicological information, exposure control information, and other information including the date of preparation or last revision. Sections 12 through 15 include ecological information, disposal considerations, transport information, and other regulatory information. These sheets are helpful and should be reviewed prior to working with chemicals. They can be found with your supervisor or in the main construction office or job site trailer. Employees are encouraged to review these sheets as often as they feel necessary. Labels used on chemical containers shall consist of 1. The product identifier, 2. The signal word, which is either danger for severe or warning for less severe. 3 is hazard statements, which is a phrase assigned to a hazard class that describes the nature of the product's hazards. 4 is the precautionary statements, describes recommended measures to minimize or prevent adverse effects resulting from exposure. 5 is the supplier identification, the name, address, and telephone number of the manufacturer or supplier, and 6 is the pictograms, which are graphic symbols intended to convey specific hazard information. The health hazard symbol represents a carcinogen, mutagenicity, reproductive toxicity, respiratory sensitizer, target organ toxicity, and aspiration toxicity. The flame symbol represents flammables, pyrophorics, self-heating, emits flammable gas, self-reactives, and organic peroxides. The exclamation mark represents an irritant to the skin and eye, skin sensitizer, acute toxicity, narcotic effects, respiratory tract irritant, or hazardous to the ozone layer. The gas cylinder symbol represents gases under pressure. The corrosion symbol represents skin corrosion or burns, eye damage, and corrosive to metals. The exploding bomb symbol represents explosives, self-reactives, and organic peroxides. The flame over circle represents oxidizers. The environment symbol represents aquatic toxicity. And the skull and crossbones represent acute toxicity, fatal or toxic. All cranes, lifts, swing stages, earth-moving, and miscellaneous engine-driven or electrical-driven equipment must be inspected by a contractor that is using the equipment. This information must be logged and turned into the Andrews Field Office. If safety checks and logs are not performed and available upon request, Andrews reserves the right to shut down any said piece of equipment and not allow usage until all inspections are complete. No drugs, alcohol, or unlawful carrying of firearms will be permitted on the job site, as well as no smoking or tobacco use will be permitted unless in designated areas. Any and all vandalism or theft in any form will be cause for termination and criminal prosecution. Radios and headphones will not be permitted on site. Temporary toilets have been provided on the job site. Employees found not using the provided toilets will be removed from the job. Each subcontractor must have a representative to accept, unload, and sign for deliveries. Subcontractors must also provide their own properly equipped flagman. Daily reports and JHAs are due in the construction office by 9 a.m. the following workday. All accidents, injuries, and near misses must be reported to Andrews staff immediately. Documentation of said event must follow within 24 hours. No exceptions.
Now is a good time to ask one of Andrew's staff any questions you may have, such as parking, the time of weekly safety meetings. Also, review over the orientation sheet to ensure that you didn't miss anything that we talked about today, and to learn about any other rules that may be specific to your job site. And again, welcome to the project. Stay safe.